Hello everyone, welcome to Study Capital YouTube platform. Please confirm whether I am audible or not so that we can continue our discussions. I'll just take a minute to rectify whether everything is all right or not, and then we'll start our discussion. Yes, I can hear myself, so I think uh, it is audible to you as well. So again, welcome you all on our platform. So we started, our preparation for CUET PG 2026 batch for MA English Entrance Program, as well as foundation course for GATE Entrance Examination. In this YouTube platform, 2 days back, we met and we discussed the course and the pattern which we can follow for preparing uh, these two programs. But remember that when we were discussing these syllabus, I told you about the major differences between the two, as well as the common patterns between these two examinations. Now we are running a course where we are discussing these things, and there is a foundation batch for that. I'll talk about it later. But as discussed, today I promised you all to talk about one of the units, and that is going to be the pattern. For next few days, I'll be discussing with you one unit from the syllabus. I'll be introducing you that unit and also letting you know the things that you have to focus on every step in that particular unit. So today's topic in that context is history of British English literature, the nomenclature, as well as the periodization. And I'll be discussing, you all know, the certain ages in which British history is divided. We have a long period of more than 2000 years, and how it is divided into certain parts and periods. We'll not only be discussing about the way ages are divided. It is obviously the first part. The title suggests you that we are going to discuss the nomenclature, but there is one question in the last two examination related to the time period. But this is not the limit to what we are going to discuss today. As I promised you to, I'll be introducing these units and what you have to do in every particular unit for your examination, the journey that you are going to take from now around 6-7 months. I'll be introducing you with the first unit, that is history of British English literature. That is what we are going to do in this video. I hope you understood the assignment. Right now, yes. So I'll just directly enter into the naming conventions of every particular era. So I'm going to discuss history of English literature, and when I say history of English literature, it is synonymous with history of British English literature, because this is their language particularly, right? So, and we know if you're a graduation English literature graduation student, you know that we have certain ages in history of British English literature. Now these ages are divided into different parts, different characteristics. So you have certain ages named after king or queen, right? Such as Queen Elizabethan period. We have, for example, Victorian period, so on and so forth. You also have ages named after the great writer of that particular period, right? So you have for 1660 to 1700, because Dryden was dominating this period, so that period is known as age of Dryden. The next period that follows it is age of Pope. Then we have age of Samuel Johnson, right? So you also have ages named after the important writer, the major canonical writer of that particular period. And interestingly, you also have certain ages names on literary characteristics, right? And those literary characteristics, that means such as the neoclassical aspect. So this is neoclassical is also a literary characteristic. Romantic aspect, which is obviously a different opposite characteristic. So we have an age called romanticism related to that. And there are few, that in that way you find that this is also a pattern. And it is not a set pattern. There is an age which is named after queen, which is the similar age is also named after king, and the similar age is also named after certain literary characteristics. So there are complexities within this periodization as well. Now for your exam, for the PG level, for the GATE level, you obviously need to know the specific time frame associated with it. Why? Because we are calling them as ages, as not as a movement. So we have postmodernism as a movement, and we also have postmodern age. Similarly, we have modernism as a movement and modern age as a particular era in history of British English literature, right? So that is a different discussion, obviously, but that is also a complexity within these ages. So every age is modern in a way. It comes up with something new. So you find neoclassical age, and then you have romanticism, which is opposing the previous age and coming up with something new. That goes with again for Victorian period. So you find Victorian period is totally opposite to what we have in the romanticism. In a way, it is modern in its approach. So every age in its own time has tendency of being modern. So what is modern age then, right? What is modernism then is is again a very important question. Good evening, Aditya. We do have a UGC net badge. You just text me on my WhatsApp number 74589878087. I'll share the details with you. We have that badge as well. Here we are discussing a thing that is related to PG exam, and obviously it is important for you as well. So if you can continue, and I'll be introducing things related to that as well. You can watch this video as well, and then we can discuss things later on. Right? Yes. So you see that there are ages, and then the complexity within every age, that there is more than that name. It's the hidden aspect is more than what is visible on on surface. So you see every particular era, the title of the era suggests you something beyond what is what is available on the surface, and that is one aspect that you'll have to explore in order to understand the particular era. Right, so this is for every age, and you see that with this, when you find naming of these ages, you also see that. Just a second. Yes, so these are the divisions, right? I'll not talk about them in great detail today, that what is Anglo-Saxon, what is Anglo-Norman, or things like that. That is again a very basic discussion. You all have ideas about these ages. And like when I'll start with what Homi K. Bhabha suggests in his writings. So Homi K. Bhabha, when you'll read two important texts in Homi K. Bhabha, Nation and Narration and Location of Culture. These are two important texts in post-colonial criticism, right? Now, in that particular text, he asks a question that whether you consider yourself as a true Indian or not. Now, why I'm saying this? Because first of all, you'll think that obviously I'm a true Indian, right? But then he gives you certain situations. Now you have to compare yourself with people who were living during the colonial time frame, or then you have to compare yourself with people who were living before colonial time frame. Now you'll understand the traditional indigenous knowledge system and things that he is referring to. So obviously you'll understand that because there was no colonial influence before the 1600, before when East India Company entered in India, those people are more Indian than us because they had that Indianness within them, right? Similarly, the British people, the original inhabitants were actually living in 55 BC, the Celtic people, the Britons, right? And then they were ruled for more than 4 centuries by the Romans. So the British part was converted into Roman Britain. And then when they left the England in 4th century, at the end of the 4th century and the beginning of the 5th century, because the invasion, Muslim invasion of the Rome, that is how England was open to different people, and the Germanic tribes came into existence, Anglo-Saxon Jutes, and that is how the literature actually started. But in order to understand that context, in order to understand the first age itself, you need to go back to understand the culture of the 55 BC and the journey from 55 BC to 450. From where Anglo-Saxon begins, right? And then obviously when if you're a graduation last year student, or even if you're a postgraduate student and you're preparing for UGC net like Aditya, you will find that in your graduation and in postgraduate syllabus, the British history part starts from age of Chaucer, right? Because obviously Chaucer was the first writer who converted East Midland dialect into English, and that is how the English in original form comes into existence. And then later on in 1476 we have Caxton introducing printing press, and that's how we find the the text being published in great numbers, so that anonymity was lost, right? So that is the true beginning of the true literature. But in order to reach there, in order to understand how Chaucer converted these things, right? How Chaucer, what were the options to Chaucer? what was happening before Chaucer. You need to understand the society before Chaucer, right? And in every age, particularly, I'll talk about the things that you have to prepare within every age, beginning from Chaucer to postmodernism. But the background is, it does not start from Chaucer. It starts from 55 BC, and then there is a history related to the historical aspect from 55 BC to 450, when the period of Anglo-Saxon starts, or also known as Old English period, and then the history related to that. And that is, there you don't find any such writer. You don't need to read that writer even till age of Chaucer. For CUET PG examination, I'll say you don't need writers, the one or two minor writers that you find before age of Chaucer. Maybe not that much important for you, but the literary characteristics, the literary environment, the social environment is very important for you, right? So there was war happening, when England was open to invasion, there were so many people attacking on England, right? Angles, Saxon, Jutes, and there were so many other tribes, and then it keeps happening till King Alfred and many other, if you have idea about it. So the war was there, right? So in the war, people will die, and there is also warriors in the war, right? So when people start writing, there will be elegies. It is very common knowledge. If there is war, people are dying, so obviously it is going to be represented through the form of poetry, through the form of elegy. And there is also the warriorship, the courage, the pride that knights were taking in war. Those who were glorifying war, those who were fighting as a king or queen. So there is glorification of war as well. So there will be epics related to it as well. So we do have epics, elegies, hagiographies, and many other literary context in before age of Chaucer as well. That is the basic thing that you may or may not know, right? So that is the historical background. So if there is literature, even though we don't know the name of the writer, but if even single text is there, every literary text is not, it's not simply existing in a loop. We do have a society around it. We do have a historical setup, political setup, social setup behind it. So you must know the social setup behind it in order to understand the linguistic aspect, the language aspect, as well as the representation of that language, that culture in literature. That is why it's important to understand the historical background. And it is not only before age of Chaucer that is important. This is the only thing that exists before age of Chaucer. With age of Chaucer, there will be so many other things than this that is important for you, right? So you can read the literature related to age of Chaucer, before age of Chaucer, in 1 or 2 days, because you just need to know the historical setup. You just need to know how that historical setup helped the literary characteristics, and then the literary characteristics particularly. And because printing press came later, so the literature was it was passed through mouth to mouth, oral transmission of literature. So we don't have that much of a content available, but the content that is there tells you that we do have dramatic monologues present before age of Chaucer in the Anglo-Saxon period itself. Now this is a question in the GATE examination. The moment you hear this word dramatic monologue, you think of Browning, you think of Tennyson, you think of T.S. Eliot. But you'll be amazed to know that there was dramatic monologue written during the Anglo-Saxon period. There were debate poetries, right, written during Anglo-Saxon period. There were hagiographies, there were riddles, there were the use of kennings, the religious aspect, as well as the war aspect that was there before age of Chaucer. Now this is one such thing. Now and that is also introducing the aspect of literature, the literary characteristics. But at the same time, what is happening around this age is also important, right? Why this is important? Because you see, the war that is taking place, war is not just one thing that only happened in Anglo-Saxon period or Anglo-Norman period. You will find war will keep coming, right? There is, for example, the war, the beginning of the war of Hastings. Then you'll have the war of the Rose. Then you will have the Civil War. Then you will have the war with the Holland during the when the essay of dramatic poesy was written, and it keeps happening. So there are so many wars, and the impact of war is also very much visible in the in the literature throughout. So those are also important junctures that you'll have to see what happened before, what happened after the war. You know, the World War I and World War II, and the impact of it on literature is tremendous, and that is why it is very, very important. Now I'll just talk about what is expected from you to read in every particular era. Now there is something that is different. What to say? Just a second. Uh, yes, before age of Chaucer, you'll have to approach it differently, and after Chaucer you'll have to approach differently if you're preparing for any exam related to English literature. What is the change? You see, because the literature was we don't know the writer's name, but we do know the names of certain text available. So the characteristics of those text is very, very important, right? Because they'll ask you questions related to the characteristics of those text. Very, very important in that context. Because the literary characteristic of that particular time frame gives you so much output at how it is going to change in the age of Chaucer. If you don't know what was happening before Chaucer, then how you'll understand what Chaucer did, right? The contribution of Chaucer, what he added, what was new in Chaucer. In order to understand that, you need to know what happened before Chaucer. That is why the literary characteristic is very important. But look at the title of the first age that we have: the Old English period or the Anglo-Saxon period. Forget about what happened between 55 BC to 450 BC. Obviously, this will help you out to understand the society, British society in general, but that is the historical part that you'll understand when you'll read it in detail. Just look at the timeline. So there are two names to this particular era. The Old English, which is based on language, right? The name that is related to language. The other is the name that is related to obviously the tribes that were there. And that age is named after those tribes. The society particularly, right? So you see the literary age, but it is named after the society of that particular time frame, the tribes that were there, as well as the language that was spoken. That tells you that even in the naming culture, you have this impact of language and society. And that is something that you'll have to carry throughout. So before entering into the literary aspect of any age, be it Jacobean or neoclassical or whatever age that you choose, you must know, you must start with the the religious aspect. What was the religion that was dominant there, religious position to different religious cultures or whatever it was there, the pagan culture, the Christian culture introduced later on in 5th century, and then Catholicism was prevailing, then how Protestantism came into existence, the Puritans and so many other sects of Christianity were introduced throughout history. So the religious aspect is very important from the very beginning, right? For example, the pagan and the Christian relationship in the beginning, how Christianity started dominating the pagan culture, and then how Roman Catholicism was pervading during age of Chaucer, then the threat to Roman Catholicism with the Lollard movement, right? Then the pre-Reformation movement which will result into Protestantism. Then what Henry VIII did, which how he introduced Anglican Church, the role of it, and then Puritans came later, and it is a development, right? I'm just giving you this aspect. Now you know the Catholic aspect, right? The sin is inevitable, repentance is always possible, says every man, which is a direct question in the GATE examination, in the NET examination. So it tells you that that this aspect of religion is going to affect literature directly. So in every age you'll see the status of religion, which religion is dominant, which is not. That is why you have an age called age of Puritan. So the age is named after the religious sect, so you understand that religion is going to be there with you throughout history, especially with the 1859 text Origin of Species, and how religion was affected with this text by a very important juncture, 1859 text by Darwin, right? So religious aspect is going to be there throughout in every age. That is the first thing that you'll see when you'll read any age. Just try to understand what are the things that you'll have to explore in every age. Religion is one such thing. The second aspect is obviously the language, right? And that is something that you'll see till age of Chaucer. Then obviously the part will not be there till that much, but yes, it is again going to be haunt you after modernism, right? I'll talk about that as well, Aditya. The June attempt, yes, it was different, but I will talk about how to approach these kind of papers as well. Now you see, this is the first aspect. Then you see the language aspect. So if you're a literature student, obviously that the old English is different from the middle English. The middle English is different from the common English that we use, the English that Chaucer used, and it is obviously different from the language that we use today. There is a development, right? You read structuralism, Sheshore talks about this kind of development, the symptomatic and dactymatic reading, right? So you read one word in history, the development of it, and you also read so many words at particular time. So the kind of development that takes place, Sheshore talks about it in structuralism. Now why I'm saying language, because you see how it is related to religion. So when you see the original inhabitants, they were speaking Celtic language. The Celts were, the language is known as Celtic. Then the Christianity was introduced, the Latin people, so their language was Latin. And then the Germanic tribes came into existence, so the Germanic dialects were there. When it all merged together, you see the different kind of people. You have Germanic, dialects available. You have Latin language available. You have the original language available, the original language of the inhabitants. You all merge this together, and the new language comes into existence. That is the Old English language, right? That is why the name age is named after it. Then you'll see the impact of the people from Normandy after 1066, after the war, and the new people will come. So the French language will be added in the Old English period, and that language will become the Middle English period. That is obviously going to be the dominating language. The elites will speak French because they are the rulers. But then Chaucer will come, he'll convert East Midland dialect into English. The Middle Ages English will transform into what Chaucer called the modern English of that particular time frame. Right, so the English will come from there. And then obviously the changes throughout English. You see, you have a modern English version of Canterbury Tales, and you also have that particular time frame English version of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It will be impossible for you to read that text in that particular language, the time 1400 English, right? It has gone through a development. There is a horizon of language as well, like horizon of expectation that reader response theorist Joss talks about, right? So language also evolved throughout. So you see, language is a very dominating factor. You find the influence of it in the early stages, and it's not just limited to there as well. You'll find that use of language throughout, how it changed. For example, you see the neoclassical age. The use of language in the neoclassical period, you know how they were using the sophistication in the language because it was the language of the elites. The literature talks about the experiences of the elites. But the language that romantics will use in future, right? The language that is going to be used by, for example, Wordsworth is different because he is going to talk about the common man people, right? So the common language that we talk about in, that he talks about in, preface to lyrical ballad. So throughout the discussion is there. You see how modern writers using different languages in their writing, right? So you see, for example, the wasteland, you have 7 different languages being used, right? I have some doubts, please clear at last. I'll not disturb you while teaching, please. Yes, please, please at the last, right? Try to understand these things and I'll discuss all of your doubts at the end of the class. So you see, wasteland used 7 different languages, right? And the foreign languages were also introduced. The poetry became polyglotic. So the language aspect is there as well. When you enter into the postmodern period, the politics of the language becomes very important. It is how related to, linguistics, semantics and other things. How language shapes our mindset. We cannot move beyond language, what a structuralist says, right? So the reality beyond language is not accessible to us. We can only know reality through our language. So till the end of the discussion, till the end of our literature, you may not read it directly, but the discussion related to language will be there throughout, right? Somehow, because literature is, you are a student of literature, and the medium that is you are using is obviously words. So language is going to be there throughout. The language aspect is also very, very important. Right, so you'll have to see the status of language. What are the languages that are being used? Why I said it is important, especially before Chaucer, because before Chaucer, there were dialects, but Chaucer, during the Chaucer time frame, you have languages being used, right? So you divide Chaucer's time frame in 3 different periods: the Italian period, the French period, the Italian period, and finally the English period. But before that, you see the dialects, the Germanic dialects, the French dialects were there, but you move beyond dialects to language for the first time in the age of Chaucer. Similarly, while literary aspect is important, the literature before age of Chaucer was idealistic in its approach. If you have read about Beowulf, you see there are more than 500 lines, especially just to introduce the courage of the Beowulf. But you don't find those things in Chaucer. It is very realistic, right? You see the Canterbury Tales, the realistic portrayal, the corruption that was prevailing in the Roman Catholicism and the society of that particular time frame was beautifully portrayed by Chaucer in his writing. So you see the development, what was happening before Chaucer, and how somehow Chaucer changed everything. Also introducing meters like rhyme royal, like what to say, the way he wrote Troilus and Cressida, and used so many other forms of, not just the content was different, but also he introduced certain forms which are new to English literature students, to English literature in general, right? That is why before Chaucer the approach can be different, but maybe those things are more important before Chaucer. But as I mentioned, these two things will run with you till the last period, even unconsciously you are not aware of. So language is one such aspect which is very, very important. If you're preparing for net, for gate examination, there are foundational theories based on language, right? You have to read French feminism, all those theories related to, the French feminist, they all the feminists, they talked about language aspect, linguistic aspect, how there is a man-made language, Spender says, right? You see Helen Seco talks about a creature feminine, women must write through their bodies because the language is also male dominated, right? You see Kristeva dividing the semiotic aspect of language with the symbolic aspect of language. So you have language debate in literary theory, and I just gave the example of feminism. You also have this discussion in postmodernism, because you cannot rely upon language, so you move from one signifier to another signifier. There's a chain of signifier. You cannot rely upon language, as well as Derrida will talk about, right? You have discussion about language in postmodernism, or in modernism particularly. If you know Whittington coming up with the concept of language games, how language is context based. So the discussion is there in theory, in literature. Every writer uses language in different way. So that is a very foundational aspect that we don't give much emphasis to, but that is also very important for your preparation. You have to start from there. And then came the historical aspect. The historical, when I say historical aspect, that means the historical events that are taking place. Now you remember these historical events, because there is one student for net as well here. I'll just introduce few things with you. You may know new historicism, that is specific to UGC net syllabus, but for gate examination and for gate examination, it is also part of the gate examination, new historicism. It is not there in CUET PG, right? But you do have postmodernism and post-structuralism in CUET PG as well. New historicism was influenced by post-structuralism, and there is a debate of language in post-structuralism, right? There is a debate of historical events in post-structuralism, how to use history. So new historicism tells you that it is not context, it is co-text. You have to read historical text with literature, and you'll not give emphasis, importance to literary text. Up throughout history padhiye, before new historicism, before 1980s, criticism always supported, or the hierarchical status was given to the literature, because you are literature student. Agar main aapse bolu literature ko analyze karna hai, you'll see the themes, you'll see the content, you'll see the imagery used by the writer. You'll not think about the age, and especially even if you're looking at the age and you're relating with it, that is historical reading, that is not new historicism. New historicism is different from old historicism. Agar aap historical background ko as a context lete hain, this is historicism. पर अगर आप हिस्टोरिकल टेक्स्ट को और नॉन हिस्टोरिकल टेक्स्ट को साथ में पढ़ते हैं और इंपॉर्टेंस इक्वल देते हैं, व्हेन यू लुक एट हिस्टोरिकल टेक्स्ट एज व्हाट Greenblatt will say, co-text, then it becomes new historicism. So there is a different lead, it's different from historicism. It is also different from Marxism. It is also different from cultural materialism. We use new historicism synonymously with cultural materialism, but they are different to each other. That is basic idea. A lot of questions were asked in the recent net examination related to understanding, and people fail to understand these things because you're not looking into these contexts as well, and obviously because it is not available in books, the basic books that we read. But if you'll read more books, the way, and that is one way, and you'll have to somehow relate these things in order to understand these technicalities, how you can look at the age from these perspectives as well. So you'll have to apply, like new historicism is actually a practical application of historical text, which we usually find in other theories. That is why it's different, and we'll be trying to do the new historicist reading of every age. In that context, historical events becomes very, very important, right? So when I say historical events, I'll just give you example. Before reading Age of Chaucer, you must know what happened, what is Black Death, what is 100-Year War, what is Taylor's Rebellion, all those important junctures. Why important? You're a literature student, this question may come into your mind, why I have to read about this? Because you have to read about this because when you'll read about 100-Year War, there is a character of Saint John fighting for France, and you have so many writers coming and writing about that particular girl called Saint John who fought for France in the 100-Year War, right? So that character Saint John is there in Saudi, is there in Mark Twain, and obviously you have a very important play written by G.P. Shaw. Just after 2 years of that particular text, he was also awarded with Nobel Prize in 1925. So the preface, the introduction part of St. John becomes very important in order to understand the 100-Year War. But I'll talk about specifically in the Chaucer's period why it is important. The overall impact is obviously larger, but if you see the age particularly, you see the 100-Year War, when it was there, the tax was imposed, and the tax was imposed. That is why there is Taylor's Rebellion, peasants' revolt. Now, so many people are dying there because there is tax and they are opposing it, but the government is not listening. So they are being killed as well. If you'll read a very important book, one of the foundational texts for British history, J. Long's, you'll find in the first page of Age of Chaucer, there's a very important quote which talks about, if Adam and Eve spin, who is a gentleman? That is a phrase. Now you see, it tells you that even if it can happen to Adam and Eve, they are also tempted. So we are not, because they're the first people and they are tempted. Who are we? We can be tempted, tempt too, right? So that aspect will tell you that this is going to be represented in literature. That is one such example. The another example is, the contemporary itself. Gover will come and will write a text, Vox Clementis. He will be sympathetic to the peasants, but he was against them as well because he thought that rebellion was not needed because there was war already going on, right? So directly you find the reference of it in the literature, and that is why that historical event is important. The second part is why peasant revolt happened. There was what was the fault of those peasants. In order to understand that, you need to see what happened in the Black Death. So when 3/4 of generation died, these people, the peasant, they accelerated their prices. So there was some problem with them as well. So you have to understand that historical aspect to understand literature in every age. I just gave you example of age of Chaucer. There are many other ages. Now if you see the Elizabethan period, I'll give you example from this era as well. Now you see, before this the beginning of the Elizabethan period, there was the vowel shift. I don't know whether you are aware about this or not, but they have asked about it in the net examination as well. And I'll try to link it with language. Right, so there was a vowel shift that happened before the Elizabethan period. You can Google it and you'll find about it, how the the pronunciation changed. So that is a link, that is a historical event, and that is also related to language, and that they have asked in your examination as well. The historical aspect is also there, the Spanish Armada that happened, because that is a very important event that changed the the way she was perceived, the way Elizabeth was perceived by people. And that is why you have Queen Gloriana, Virgin Queen, and many other references by Spencer in the the Fairy Queen, right? So why she was glorified? Why there were many other king and queens in history, but why we only think of Queen Elizabeth as someone who was glorified throughout literature? We don't talk about Queen Anne, right? We have Queen Anne in history. We have many other kings, but they were not as much glorified as as Elizabeth. So what is difference? Why she was that much glorified? In order to understand, you need to understand the history, the Spanish Armada, what changes happened because of Spanish Armada, what Bishop's Band did, for example, the role of Bishop's Band, right? These are historical events. Or for example, the kind of money that she gave to the formation of theater. such as the theater, the kind of money that she was giving to people like what to say, uh, Spencer, right? The court poets, the attempt to create such court poets, it is also important to understand. So the historical part is related to the literary part, and that is also going to be very, very beneficial for you, right? So not only religion, not only language, which I am trying to explain you that it is going to be everywhere in every year somehow, the historical aspect. And when you are done with the historical events of the era, then you enter into the literary characteristics, right? Before entering into the what you say writers. Writers पे आप बाद में जाएंगे, because अभी तक अगर आप पढ़ चुके हैं इस एस्पेक्ट को कि कैसे हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स हुए हैं, तब आपको समझ में आएगा कि कैसे हिस्टोरिकल इवेंट्स को लिटरेचर के अंदर रिप्रेजेंट किया गया है. फॉर्म समझ में आएगी, और उस फॉर्म को समझने के लिए उस एज के स्ट्रक्चरल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स, लिटरेरी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स को समझना पड़ेगा, राइट? जैसे अगर आप neoclassical age padhe, so the title suggests you that it is a neoclassical, so classical form will return in some form, some ways. So how it was introduced in literature, right? So you see the heroic drama comes into existence. So in order to understand what is heroic drama, you need to know the classical influence, the French influence, how they were merged together, right? And then obviously you need to understand the characteristics of the heroic drama, the characteristics of the restoration drama, the the particular era, 17th century, the role of satire there, the role of wit there, the role of reason there, enlightenment there. This is something that you'll understand when you look at the literary characteristic of every age in particular. That is not available everywhere that you'll get to know about it. You'll have to explore many books, you'll have to explore different aspects in order to understand the literary aspect of this era. Now you see, when you move ahead with literary character, I'll not give much emphasis to it, I'm just introducing you things. I'll talk about one by one in upcoming classes, but yes, so the first aspect is of religion, the second aspect is of language, the third aspect is of historical events, the fourth aspect is of literary characteristics. Then you are in a position to see writers of the age, the minor what to say, the major writers and the minor writers, right? So first you'll just see, before entering into their works, right, before entering into their works, you'll see their canon, how much they have written. So if the canon is large and the texts are also important, it becomes they are a part of the major writers. But if the canon is weak and the content is also less, then it becomes minor writers. You know the difference between the two, because the way western canon is especially framed, and the way they are asking questions, both are important for you. So the minor works for the major writers, the major works for the minor writers, other than the important works by these two as well. Now when you look at these writers, and you are already aware about the literary characteristics, if you are aware about the literary characteristics, then it is going to help you, because you know that satire is going to be used in the period of age of Pope. So you'll look at the satire in Pope, and then it is available to you in every different work. I hope you get that. If you're looking for that imagination in romantics, then you'll look at it, or the nature in romantics, you'll look those things in Wordsworth, and it is given to you, right? So with the knowledge of literary characteristics, then you enter into the writers, it becomes easy for you. But then there are exceptions as well. I'll not say that is going to be completely helpful to you, but there are people such as, for example, if you'll see the romantic itself, there is Byron. He was a romantic writer, but his favorite writer was Alexander Pope, and is very different from the romantics. And you'll find these one or two people everywhere, revolutionary. In every age, there are people who are writing against the grain, right? So there are people like that as well. So that is something that you'll see, and then you'll see the status of, and that is something very important, which we don't do that very often, the status of every genre in every age. Because you will not get time, even if you have 2 years, 3 years for this exam, you'll not be able to go back to every particular era separately for looking at the status of these different genres. And what are the genres then? Because with the postmodern word, you have poetry merged with prose. You have prose written in the form of poetry, and everything is merged together. So the pastist version has developed different types of genre as well. But the traditional sense, the genre in the traditional sense, you have, for example, drama. Within drama, I'll just talk about the traditional aspect. You have comedy, you have tragedy, you have, for example, poem, poetry, right? What you say, poetry. Now, you do have different types of poetry, so that's a different discussion. So you'll have to see the status of poetry, the famous poetry writers. You can also read them together. For example, you start with poetry, so you see the characteristics of poetry first, and then you see the major writers of the age, the poetry writers, and then their works. That is also one such approach that you can take. Other than that, you can also read the major minor and then come to the status of these positions. So when I say drama, what kind of drama is written, not just what drama written, right? Not just what, but you have to ask questions like how it was written, why it was written, and who was writing, where he was writing. You get that? And there is so much more. Why this is important? When you look at the drama and you say how it was written, you get to know about the form, right? Like theater of absurd. So you see, Waiting for Godot, you ask this question how it is written. There is a repetition, there is nonsensical aspect, nonsensical statements being there. So you'll have to understand these things as well, right? Not just the basic thing that is it's an absurdist drama, but you have to ask how. So how the absurd, the text represent the absurdity. So you have repetition in form of repetition, you have in form of nonsensical statements, you have in form of what you say, short statements. So much, there's so much more that you can explore through this question. Then you see why it is written. So every text is a revolution, is a revolt against something, right? So you understand when you read about it, the content will tell you why it is written. You see any text, you see Canterbury Tales. It is written to what you say, to show you the society of the age, to tell you the corruption that was prevailing in the in the age of Chaucer. So it gives you that kind of information. That is why it was written. There are also texts which are written without any purpose. Then you think about art for life's sake, art for art's sake. So there is art for life's sake. Most of the content that we have till Victorian period is art for life's sake. It is coming up with certain message. That message you'll get to know when you'll ask this question, why it is written, right? And that is something that you'll not ask to people. You have to ask. You have to explore these things in literature, in the text, that any text that you are taking. Then who has written? Obviously the information, right? Who has written, where it was written, in which magazine it is published, when it was published, right? The basic information related to that. So you see any text, you think of Fairy Queen, so you have to know Spencer wrote it. The first 3 books were published in 1590. The other 3 books, along with 6 books, published in 1596. They were published there, and then the 1609 we have the 7th book. The first, fragmented part of the 7th book was published there. So then the later was written to Walter Raleigh, where he introduced it, the idea. So all those things are, they are under the term who. So it's not just who wrote it, but the background related to that text. And then where it was written is also important. The setting. I have seen so many questions being asked. The setting related to works, right? So and not just from the major writers, major text. Any minor text they will take, and they'll ask you about the setting of that text. It is a repetition. It is not just something that is specific to net. And if we have Aditya here, and if he is listening us, he'll let you know about the kind of questions that was asked recently in the net examination. But I can tell you about PG, GATE, and many other examinations. They are very basic question where the writer was. For example, they'll give you 4 writers, out of which 3 were Irish, 4th one is not. You have to find out who is odd in that group. So the where aspect related to the text, the where aspect related to the author also becomes important for you. And then obviously the major aspect, the minor writer, the historical data is available, the kind of things that are available is important for you. Then what other things that you have to see? You see, there is so much from one age, and maybe it is going to be very difficult, but you do have a lot of time from now. And that is why I'm telling you that these things are important because it is going to be the foundation for you. A very interesting approach that I'm trying to incorporate within master's students, so that the way they're asking net questions, it should not become very much problematic for you. If your base is correct, if your base is right, then every other exam that you will follow in your life, that you'll give in your life, will not become that much problematic, right? So that is there. Then you see, after reading about the writers, about the content that they're writing, the status of every particular genre, again, as I was mentioning genre, so there is drama, the traditional drama, right? The status of drama, the traditional genre that exists. We have comedy, we have tragedy there, and then you also have different kinds of drama that will come in future, right? The meta theatrical drama, or the modern drama, the development of the postmodern drama, the theater of absurd, the epic theater, many more others. But generally, comedy and tragedy. So what is the status of comedy? What are the comedy writers? What are the tragedy writers? And the way tragedy is written, the way comedy is written, you have definitions from tragedy by Aristotle, you have definition of tragedy by Dryden, right? You have writers saying Shakespearean comedies are more better than his tragedies, like people like Samuel Johnson. So you have so many people talking about these genres other than the status of genre, right? So you have to look at those aspects, and the development of drama in every age, who is writing, what kind of drama is written in every age. Similarly, poetry, what kind of poetry is written by which writers, the characteristics of poetry from every age. Novel as well. So these are three most important parts, and then within it you also have types of these what to say, genres. And then you also have autobiographies. There was one question in this year examination related to autobiography. So you have to read the autobiographical text from every age, and it is again starts from the very early period. It's not like it's a modern genre. You have, for example, text by Rousseau called Confessions, which is autobiographical in its approach. Medieval text, I just gave you example of medieval text. You have text by Martin Luther, autobiographical, talking about his experiences, right? So the early part, the Middle Ages, the contemporary era, everywhere where you have writers writing autobiography, or and then not just autobiography. If I say life writing, instead of saying autobiography, I should use the word life writing, which is also part of your syllabus. Then there is not just autobiography, there is biography, right? There is memoir, right? There is autofiction, autobiography and fiction merged together, right? And many other forms of autobiography that you can, life writing that you can explore, right? Then you have obviously short stories, not बहुत बड़ा जॉनरा नहीं है. अमेरिकन शॉर्ट स्टोरीज से अगर आप स्टार्ट करेंगे with Edgar Allan Poe, it starts from 1843, right? And then you have around 20-25 American writers and then British writers that you have to cover in short stories. Very important because it's different genre given to you in your syllabus, and genre where people lag behind, right? And then you also have what to say, many other genres you can add. I'm not talking about the genres that emerge from these major groups. So you have drama, so you have different types of tragedies, different types of comedies, and the postmodern drama, modern drama. Similarly, you have ode, you have sonnet, you have lyric, you have many other types of poetry, the groups of poetry. So then that is how you move to the next thing that you have to explore in every age, and that is the groups. The groups, the clubs. This can be literary and non-literary both. Right? When I say literary, there are so many clubs and events taking place. So you have Kit Kat Club, you have Scribbles Club, you have the Pre-Raphaelite schools, right? You have the Cockney School of Poetry, you have the Satanic School of Poetry, you have many other groups. I hope you're getting this. So in every age you find these schools. There will be one or two schools or clubs or groups available in every age from the beginning to the last. You'll have to see the members, the names of the members in every group. If there is any magazine associated with it or not, right? Why I'm saying magazines, the germ related to Pre-Raphaelite, the yellow book related to the decadence, they have asked in the JNU examination back then in 2020, right? So that means they're important. You have to see that. The characteristics, obviously, who is a part of which group, why the group was formed, what that group was doing. For example, the Scribbler Club, so they have created this character called a Scribbler, and they used to write satires against the government by using that particular pen name. So it is again related to the age. You see the neoclassical period, how difficult it was to write against the government, the Tory, and the politics behind it, right? So in order to understand that, you have to look at the groups, clubs, and the people associated with it. It becomes very important later in the modern period. But why? Because if you'll see from 1890 to 1980, most of the questions that they ask from groups within this particular time frame. I can give you names: the Decadent movement, the aesthetic movement, the Imagism, Dadaism, Surrealism, Harlem Renaissance. These are our 1910 movements, right? The lost generation of 1920, the Ordin group of 1930, the new apocalypse poetry of 1940s, the movement poetry, the confessional poetry, the kitchen sink drama, angry young movement, and many other movements in 1950s, the Martian poetry of 1960s, and it goes on. So you see, within this period, we do have a lot of literary clubs and movements and schools emerging. So that also becomes important because they directly ask questions from the names of the people who are part of it, or the anthologies that are coming from these groups, the father of these groups, the members of these groups, and what they are doing, the characteristic, the writing style of these groups, to whom they are writing, to whom against they are writing, all those things. The content is important from all those things. So that is also something that you look in every age. You'll have to find out all these things in every age. Then you see, I started talking about these things. I must have, first discussed the age, but in order to reach the age, these are the things that are important. I talked about the socio-political atmosphere, the literary techniques, the major literary events or movements and school of thoughts in every period, the major authors and their works, the minor authors and their works, the evolution of literary genres. All these things I have talked about. The awards are also important, right? So not just the major award. I'll tell you, when we think of awards, we think of Booker, we think of Nobel, we must think about Sahitya Academy Award, we think about Gyanpith Award, sorry, right, Gyanpith Award मिट गया है, but I hope कि समझ में आ रहा, सुनाई दे रहा होगा आपको. Gyanpith Award, but this may be American award as well, but you'll find in your examination that different kinds of award based on genres, right? So because genres are part of your syllabus, so you have, for example, speculative fiction, right, as a genre, which is a part of fiction. Type of novel में आपको मिलेगा fiction, speculative novels, science fiction novels, right? And you have awards for these genres as well, right? Philip K. Dick Award, for example. Philip K. Dick is very famous in speculative fiction. So there is an award based on that, based on this genre. There are Indian awards based on given to dramatists in India. I can think of Larin Sahib. ये क्वेश्चन बार बार रिपीट होता है नेट एग्जामिनेशन में, पीजी में, गेट में, हर जगह. इसको कौन सा अवार्ड मिला? देयर टू पीपल, वन लारेन साहब वाले, दूसरा जो ओनली राइटर, जो मेजर राइटर्स हमको मिलते हैं जो ओरिजिनली इंग्लिश में लिख रहे हैं, एंड दैट आर पीपल लाइक, फॉर एग्जांपल, द फर्स्ट राइटर हु वाज अवार्डेड विद साहित्य अकेडमी इन ड्रामा इन इंडिया. सो यू सी दोज पीपल, Tara and other works that you find, वो awards भी हैं. So not just the major awards, obviously there will be a question from Booker and Nobel in your exam, but एक दो questions ऐसे भी आते हैं जो unexpectedly दूसरे awards से आते हैं. वहाँ को समझने के लिए you have to see that, you have to look at those aspects as well, right? Then I'll talk about it later. Then you have literary debates coming in every age, right? When I say literary debates and controversy, think about the Licensing Act. Think about what you say, like the bishop's ban that I talked about. So there's so many controversies taking place. People are writing against each other. They are writing in favor of something. They are writing in against something. And the debate, every age comes with certain debates. People are fighting against each other or writing in solace or in comparison to each other. So those debates you have to find out. The genres, journals, every age, the periodicals, right? So the periodical culture that starts from the time frame when Queen Anne was writing, for example, ruling 1702 to 1740. That period you have the review, right? You have, for example, the spectator. You have the Tetler. The Tetler came first, then came the Spectator, the Guardian. This is just happening within first 20 years of 1700 to 1720. Now you see, not only what was taking place in their time frame, but you'll have to go through the Spectator Club. There are 550 papers, out of which 4 or 5 of important. जैसे एक उसी के अंदर एक पेपर है aims of spectator, right? So what was the aim of spectator, or what was the aim of Tetler, for example? So this is a different paper from that text. There is one essay, paper within the spectator clubs that introduces the characters of spectator clubs, and these are the questions. They'll ask you questions from the characters of the particular club, the permanent characters, the temporary characters. So in order to understand, that means you have to look at the periodicals of the beginning from 18th century to the 20th century, and obviously the magazines as well. So which writer, for example, when I say London Magazine, you must know the people, famous writers who have published their works in London Magazine. Not just the magazine, I'll tell you, they have asked about the name of the illustrator from Dickens as well. Dickens illustrator is very famous, so they have asked about that as well. So those are also the things that you'll have to see, because the exam is 60% factual in based, and that is why you have to look at these things as well. And the milestone as well. Obviously, the historical milestone are important, because the first novel, the first tragedy, the first comedy, the first novel, those kind of aspects are also important. Sir, 196 मार्क इन CT PG सर BHU मिल जाएगा ना, क्योंकि DU नहीं मिल रहा था, बट मैंने मिल रहा था, बट मैंने नहीं लिया क्योंकि मैं वाराणसी ही रहना चाहता हूँ. ओके, सो आदित्य, आपका EWS है क्या आदित्य? AWS होगा तो आई थिंक बहुत आसानी से आपको मेन कैंपस मिल जाना चाहिए अभी के लिए, बिकॉज जिस तरीके का कट ऑफ DU का गया है 220, तो आई थिंक आई एम एक्सपेक्टिंग कि अराउंड 200 आपको BHU में एडमिशन फर्स्ट मेन कैंपस में आराम से मिल जाना चाहिए. आई टॉक अबाउट इट. ठीक है. Then you see, I mentioned these things. So the socio-political context, as I mentioned. So you see, this is the picture of a war. This is a picture of how the Pope was the major authority in the age of Chaucer. The Roman Catholicism was prevailing. So that is there. Then you see the war that is taking place. Chaucer was also a diplomat. He also participated in war. He was captured in Italy. So there is reference related to that. You see the Black Death picture. So this is one age. There are many ages, and you'll have to find out everything what is taking place there as well. The theatre in England, right? So it starts from the theatre. Especially, I'll only talk about the Elizabethan period. You have a range of theatre: Rose Theatre, Swan Theatre, Blackfriars Theatre, Globe Theatre. So open theatre, closed theatre. Who founded the theatre? Before theatre we had playhouses. How playhouses different from theatre, and then who was giving money to these playhouses? There are companies like Shakespearean company who used to perform the plays. Then there are also if there is theatre, if there is companies, then there are groups as well. So we have the university wits and their ways performing. Then there are characters. If there is a performance, there are actors as well. So Renaissance actors becomes important for you. There are stages. So the people who have designed stage, so stage designers are also someone whom you have to remember. If especially they have asked question related to mask, stage designer names. Inigo Jones, I have talked about it multiple times in our YouTube videos as well. So you see, you're only looking at theatre, but when you look at the theatre, you'll see the playhouse. Then you'll see the playhouse, how we reach to theatre. You'll understand there are companies who are performing theatres. The groups, members of the groups, and if there are groups they are performing, there will be actors. So who are the actors? The name of the actors. Then obviously there is a stage where it is performed. So who designed that stage? So it's a great list. It's not just one thing or two things that you have to read. And if you'll just see everything in chronological order, The moment you're done with British history, it will obviously going to take a lot of time, but when you're done with this thing, you'll realize that within PG you have earned so much that you can build so many things, and they are asking questions. It's not like that it's so much information for PG. They have asked about the Renaissance actor in 2022 exam. You can look at these things. So if they can ask one question, they're asking one question from these topics, we can't ignore it, we can't just leave behind because there is one question. But even if there is one question, we have to read everything related to that. So that is also something that is important for us. Then you see the schools, as I mentioned this picture. Look at this picture: child labor employer, right? The realistic aspect, if you read the writings of Dickens, you find the criticism of it. This is realism. You remember, can anyone tell me, if we have people here, then can you tell me ये picture किस age से reference है, किस text का reference है? So there is one character asking for food, and this will say more, and he will be beaten for asking for the extra food. Right? This is the reality. Right? This is the realism being depicted by the writer Dickens. In the Oliver Twist, he asked for extra food and he was beaten in this workhouse. So the reality is being represented. Realism is one such a school. I just giving you example. Now, in response to realism, for example, you have naturalism. Right? The whole age will come after it. The modern literature will be critical to this realistic writing. So many people will come, will criticize the realism. And this realistic novels is not just what to say, modernism or naturalism will criticize. If you'll read the theory, for example, if you'll read Marxism, you might know the name of neo-Marxist Althusser. Althusser, while talking about ideological state operators, repressive state operators, discussed how realistic novel are problematic because they give you certain specific ideology. They serve you the ideology of the elites, right? And this criticism is not just there in Marxism, which was there during the same time frame. There is modernism as well, as I mentioned, and modernism will say that this realistic school deliberately talks about the chronology, right? हर realistic novel में क्या होगा? हर realistic novel के अंदर आपको chronological order मिलेगा, right? Chronological sequence मिलेगा. A happened, then B happened, then C happened. Modernism में ऐसा नहीं होगा. Modernism will revolt against it. That is why we have stream of consciousness in modernism, right? Again, a group and a technique of writing. I forgot to mention the literary techniques that are also important in every age, right? So you see stream of consciousness, and then gives you the idea that how it is revolting against realism. तो क्या होता है, यूजुअली हम इनको सेपरेटली पढ़ते हैं, पर अगर आप कनेक्शन में पढ़ेंगे कि कैसे रियलिज्म आया पहले और कैसे modern literature या Marxism को criticize करेगा, then only you will understand stream of consciousness, and then within it you will understand joyous use of it. Joyous use of stream of consciousness is definitely 100% different from the way Virginia Woolf will use it, right? So उसके अंदर भी आपको differences देखने को मिलेंगे. That is something that you have to understand. And this is just one school. There are more than 20 schools in what you say, British literature. Then you obviously the major poems, novels, and their adaptations, right? The debates and controversies of every period. You see, I mentioned Areopagitica speech, which was obviously written in 1643 against the licensing censorship that came there. There is you see the censorship, right? It's an image that reflects the censorship. The magazines, the retellings related to that. I talked about Hack Seat many times, how they asked about this cushion, the what is a Tempest retelling by the Royal Society Theatre. Then you have historical events, as I mentioned. Look at the places, how every place will tell you, there are people who have written about these places. You see, you can see the West Yorkshire, Wuthering Height is based on this place. Why I am telling you these places are important? The original places, the original setting of the text, if it is available, then it is important, right? You see questions from Jane Austen. They'll simply give you names of the state, and you'll have to find out which character owns which estate from the Pride and Prejudice, right? So this is there. Again, very important, original settings. And if there is imaginary places, then again it's important, because imaginary, there are people like Hardy, for example, who have created this place called Wessex. There are people like, for example, in Indian context, creating places like Malgudi, or in American context, you have, uh, you know, uh, a very important writer again, who wrote Absalom, and many other texts, important texts, the Hamnet and others. Faulkner, he'll again come up with his own Yorkshire, a new, what to say, imaginary land. So all these places, England, Scotland, Ireland, you have writers exploring these places in great detail. So that is also something that you'll have to look in every particular era. Now, as I mentioned, these are the things that you have to understand. Then the time frame. Look at the time frame. Now I'll talk about the time frame, and then I'll conclude the class. Sir, if I take admission in this year, then I'm eligible for UGC in a December attempt. Yes, if you'll take admission in the master's program, you'll be eligible for the December net attempt. Yes. Okay. Now you see the time, as I mentioned, I'll not talk about it in great detail because you all are aware about these things, but there are divisions, right? And I talked about the major ways it is divided. So till this period, you have the literature written during, what to say, the time frame. I'll just give you one question in your exam. They'll just give you the name of the age and you'll have to tell the time frame. So if you what you have to do, जिस दिन आप प्रिपरेशन स्टार्ट करें, इसका स्क्रीनशॉट लें, अपनी कॉपी में लगा लें, लिख लें, अपने टेबल पे लिख लें और रोज देखते रहें, क्योंकि अलग अलग बुक में अलग तरीके से डिवीजन मिलेगा. जो स्टैंडर्ड डिवीजन है वो मैंने यहाँ पे मेंशन कर दिया है, आप इसको देख सकते हैं. क्यों है? हर एज का किसी पर्टिकुलर जंक्चर से स्टार्ट होने का एक रीजन है, और इसीलिए वो इम्पोर्टेंट है. हर एज अपने प्रीवियस एज के डिफरेंस में होगी, टोटली अपोजिट होगी, और कुछ हुआ होगा इस पीरियड में, कुछ हुआ होगा फर्स्ट पार्ट में जहां पे वो शुरू हुआ, कुछ हुआ होगा लास्ट ईयर में जहां पे वो खत्म हो. देयर इज ए स्पेसिफिक रीजन. कोई ऐसा रैंडमली डिवाइड नहीं किया गया है. ठीक है, ये सब चीजों को आपको देखना पड़ेगा. तो देखिए 1066 में क्या हुआ था? नॉर्मन कॉन्क्वेस्ट वॉर ऑफ हेस्टिंग्स हुआ था, जहां से मोनार्की शिफ्ट होगी, रूल शिफ्ट होगा फ्रॉम एंग्लो सेक्शन टू एंग्लो नॉर्मन. इसीलिए ये पीरियड रखा गया 1066 पे, इसको एंड किया गया. ठीक है, अब एंड किया गया तो नेक्स्ट स्टेज स्टार्ट होगा, वो 1340 पे एंड होता है. क्यों 1340 पे एंड होता है? क्योंकि चौसर का बर्थ हुआ था. 1400 पे क्यों एंड होता है एज ऑफ चौसर? क्योंकि चौसर की डेथ होती है. अब मोस्ट ऑफ द बुक्स यू विल सी दे विल मेंशन दिस नेक्स्ट पीरा from 1400 to 1550. That is the standard time frame for the age of darkness or age of revival. Now you see, this is again a paradoxical statement. It is the age of darkness, and at the same time it is the age of revival. So you'll have to understand, if you're not aware about the historical, political, social and literary aspect, you'll not be able to understand why, for example, Petrarch called the middle ages as dark ages. Now to understand that, you have to look at the background, right? So that is why it is important. Then इसीलिए मैंने पहले उसकी बात की, फिर मैं इस चीज की बात कर रहा हूँ. ठीक है, तो ये टाइम फ्रेम क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है? मोस्ट ऑफ द बुक्स में आपको ये मिलेगा. फिर 8 साल कहाँ गए वो समझने के लिए रेनेसा समझना होगा, और इसीलिए मैंने यहाँ पे डायरेक्टली 58 लिख दिया था. टाइम फ्रेम ओरिजिनल डेट इज दिस, राइट? देन क्वीन एलिजाबेथ बिकेम queen in 1558. She was there till 1603. इसीलिए the Elizabethan period. फिर when she died, the Tudor dynasty was there. I may forget to mention कुछ dynasties हैं जो आपके लिए एग्जाम के लिए important हैं. Tudor dynasty, Stuart dynasty that will follow it, right? So people associated with Tudor dynasty: Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward VI, Queen Mary, and then Queen Elizabeth. Same goes with the Stuart dynasty: James I, Charles I, Charles II, James II, then Queen Mary and William. Then for some time, what to say, Queen Anne was there, but in between you also have the interregnum period. So you have to understand the people, the queen ruling in these dynasties. Their role is very very important. बहुत कुछ किया है एलिजाबेथ ने, बहुत कुछ किया है हेनरी एट ने, हेनरी सेवेंथ ने, चार्ल्स वन ने, चार्ल्स टू ने, जेम्स टू ने. द कंट्रीब्यूशन इज इमेंस, एंड दैट इज व्हाई देयर टाइम फ्रेम इज आल्सो इंपॉर्टेंट. दैट इज व्हाई यू हैव ages named after him, right? So when Queen Elizabeth will die, there the shift from Tudor to Stuart dynasty, because she died without marriage, without child. So you'll have to go back again and you see the sister of Henry VIII and to whom she was married, and then you'll see the connection with what you say Stuart dynasty in Scotland. You have James IV there. James IV of Scotland married to Margaret, sister of Henry VIII, so it is directly related. From James IV to James V, James VI will come, and James VI of Scotland will become James I of England, a Latin name Jacobean. That is why the Jacobean period, right? It will end in 1625. Then Caroline means Charles in Latin. The Charles I will come, he'll rule till 1649. There is a historical event there. 1642 to 1651 द सिविल वॉर ऑफ इंग्लैंड, 49 में चार्ल्स वन को मार दिया जाएगा, मोनार्की पहली बार एस्टेब्लिश होगी, इसीलिए कॉमनवेल्थ पीरियड, short period for 11 years, people will realize the life. So from 1642 to 1660 life was very very tough. The Puritan impact, the impact of Oliver Cromwell, the lifestyle that was there was very difficult for people. How the England was converted into one book, and that book was Bible. How it was mandated, what to say, used for people. The rule was very difficult. That's why they wanted restoration. So the restoration will come in 1660. That is why the age is called at 1660. It's also known as Age of Dryden because Dryden was the main writer, representative writer of this era, and Dryden will die in 1700. That is how the age is ended. Then you have Age of Pope. So Pope died in 1744, and there is another writer, Jonathan Swift, who died in 1745. These two writers were major writers of this period. So when Swift died in 45, we end this period. And then the Samuel Johnson comes, he died in 85. That is how we end this period as well. So there is so much related, there is so much connected with each other. I'll not talk about the characteristics because it will take a lot of time to discuss how every age is different from each age. That is something that we can explore in our classes, but it is also there, right? Then you see, before entering into romanticism, you see the pre-romantic. So now two ages are merged together because it is not a specific period, a time frame, but it is a momentary thing. It's something that was happening in between. तो जैसे मैंने बोला कि हर एज में कुछ कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स हैं, पर वहाँ पे एक्सेप्शंस भी हैं. ये राइटर्स जो आपको मिलेंगे, फॉर एग्जांपल ग्रेवयार्ड पोएट्स, तो ग्रेवयार्ड पोएट्स थोड़े से एक्सेप्शनल हैं. द टाइम फ्रेम इफ विल सी, दे आर the writing during the time frame of neoclassical period, but the content and form, two important things that you see. So you'll find whether the content is romantic or the form is romantic, whether the content is in neoclassical and the form is romantic, or the form is romantic and the content is neoclassical. तो आप देखेंगे merge करेंगे दोनों चीजों को, exception, और वो फिर प्री रोमांटिक्स में भी होगा जो आपको ब्लेक और अदर राइटर्स में देखने को मिलता है, थॉमस थॉमसन, ब्लेक, कूपर एंड अदर राइटर्स. तो वो प्री रोमांटिक्स हैं जो 1798 तक रहेंगे. फिर लिरिकल बैलेट पब्लिश होता है 1798 में, और वहां से 1837 तक. क्यों 1837 तक? 37 में क्वीन विक्टोरिया विल बिकम क्वीन ऑफ इंग्लैंड. कुछ मेजर बुक्स में 1832 भी लिखा रहता है क्योंकि एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एक्ट वहां पे आया था, पर वो नहीं है, ये याद रखना है. इसीलिए बहुत क्वेश्चन बनते हैं कि विक्टोरियन पीरियड कहां से स्टार्ट होता है. तो 37 में जब क्वीन विक्टोरिया बनी, 1901 में व्हेन शी डाइड, so many things will happen. She'll become the of India as well. बहुत सी चीजें होंगी इस टाइम फ्रेम में, इंडिया के अंदर बहुत सी चीजें इंट्रोड्यूस होंगी. तो ये पीरियड भी उस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. फिर देखिए मॉडर्न और पोस्ट मॉडर्न में जब टाइम फ्रेम से आप देखते हैं, जब मूवमेंट से देखते हैं, तो मॉडर्निज्म विल बी देयर टिल 1960s. पोस्ट मॉडर्निज्म विल कम इन लेट 1970s और इन 1980s. जैसे लियोटार्ड का वर्क है द पोस्ट मॉडर्न कंडीशन, that will come in 1979. वो ऐसा टेक्स्ट है जहां से पोस्ट मॉडर्निज्म एज ए मूवमेंट एक्चुअली में स्टेब्लिश होता है. मॉडर्निज्म का इंपैक्ट 60s तक आपको दिखेगा. पोस्ट मॉडर्निज्म का इंपैक्ट लियोटार्ड से स्टार्ट होता है विद 1979 एज ए मूवमेंट. बट अगर अंडरस्टैंडिंग के लिए समझना है, क्योंकि लिटरेरी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स समझना डिफिकल्ट होता है, तो सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर तक जो पीरियड है उसको आप मॉडर्न, और उसके बाद का पीरियड पोस्ट मॉडर्न समझ सकते हैं. पर ये समझिएगा कि ये सिर्फ आपकी क्या कहते हैं बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग के लिए है. जो इसकी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स हैं वो काफी लंबे समय तक दिखेंगी, जो इसके थ्योरेटिकल फ्रेमवर्क हैं वो काफी लंबे समय तक दिखेंगे. तो पोस्ट मॉडर्न एज ए थ्योरी विल इमर्ज इन लेट 1970s. 1979 का मैंने टेक्स्ट बोला, और उसके बाद के टेक्स्ट में ही आपको पोस्ट मॉडर्निज्म मिलेगा. मॉडर्निज्म 1960s 70s तक आपको राइटर्स में मिलेगा, पर लिटरेचर के अंदर कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स जब आप देखेंगे तो वो यहाँ से चेंज हो जाएंगी. एंड स्पेशली 20th सेंचुरी में डिपार्चर करना, डिफरेंस करना थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है क्योंकि कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स सेम्स हैं. फ्रेगमेंटेशन, फॉर एग्जांपल, आई जस्ट गिव यू वन एग्जांपल. Fragmentation is there in modern literature as well and in postmodern literature as well, but the approach is different. The modern people will see fragmentation as something that is tragic, problematic है, solution ढूंढेंगे. But the postmodern people will see it, they are not bothered, they will enjoy this fragmentation. That is why you have theater of absurd celebrating the fragmentation, enjoying it rather than problematizing it, and you have text like Wasteland, where they are considering this fragmentation as tragic. They are lamenting over the past that was beautiful for them, right? तो लिटरेरी कॉन्टेक्स्ट से थ्योरेटिकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट से डायमेंशंस क्या होंगे धीरे धीरे बदलते हुए भी दिखेंगे, पर ये एक स्ट्रक्चरल एक कंक्रीट डिवीजन है जो आपके काम आएगा इस एज को एक्सप्लोर करने में. सो आई होप कि इस वीडियो के थ्रू आपको समझ में आएगा कि ये छोटी सी एज नहीं है, बहुत सी चीजें और आपस में रिलेटेड है. आई ट्राइड माय बेस्ट टू टेल यू हाउ these ages are related to not just, this is not just one unit, but this is a unit which is associated with theory, with criticism, with linguistic aspect, as well as events, terms and everything that you'll find in this age. So जो आपके सिलेबस का पार्ट है, आपको जो दिखता है सेपरेटली दिया हुआ, वो सेपरेटली नहीं है कि मैं आपको एक बुक दे दूं of 500 pages, you read it and you'll clear the exam. Everything is related. So 20% questions will be there from your understanding, and 60 to 70% will be question there on the in the factual information, and there will be 10% questions obviously जो कि बहुत different होंगे, जो कि it will be very difficult for me as well to solve them, right? समझना क्या है कि those 20% जिनको 10-5 क्वेश्चन जिनको हम छोड़ देते हैं because हमको इतना ना पढ़ना पड़े, वही मेरिट बनाते हैं. उसी से आप JNU जाएंगे, उसी से आप BHU जाएंगे, IFLU जाएंगे या फिर कानपुर यूनिवर्सिटी जाएंगे. That is something that those 20-30% questions will decide, right? And this is because you're prepared. This is a video for CUT PG. I'm telling you the things that I have mentioned here. If you'll read it during the during your preparation for PG entrance examination, it is surely going to help you for GATE 100%. And when you'll start preparing for your GATE for your NET examination, you'll feel 30%, 40% more confident than those who will just read it like factual information to clear this examination. So it's obviously up to you to decide. For my part, I'm just explaining things to you, that what are the things that you can explore so that you can read these things on your own as well. If you want to read it on your own, these are the things that you have to explore. If you want a guidance, there is a batch that we have launched. You can explore that as well. It's up to you. Just look at it, and we are going to start our classes related to it very soon, I think from 8th onwards. But before that, I'll try my best to explain everything from every unit so that at least know what are the things that you have to what to say explore in these units, right? So that if you want to do it on your own, you can do that. So I'm very anxious about admission because I have not filled any other universities for only BHU. Yes, you'll get into BHU. What score you said? Again, Aditya, I'll conclude this class with your doubt. I think if you're my old student, you'll have my number, I believe. And if you have my number, you can text me. I'll talk about it with you on WhatsApp. Okay. But I believe you'll get into BHU more than 190, 196 you mentioned, I think, and 196 I believe is more than enough for BHU, because 220 is net what to say score for DU. So are you a DU student? How you are getting DU in 196? I just want to know. Were you from DU in your graduation? If you're from DU, then I believe you're getting DU for post graduation in 196. Otherwise, it is around 220, right? But surely around 200, 1 or 2 marks here and there, you'll get marks. Okay, so my number is 745898787. You just text me on WhatsApp and I'll talk about these things with you. Okay, I hope it helps. So those who are preparing for CET-PZ and GATE and other examination, as I mentioned before, we do have a course for that. I'll talk about it later. Tomorrow when we'll meet with a different unit, and I'll tell you how to explore those units, how to look at those things. So probably with criticism, tomorrow I'll talk about what are the things that you have to read in criticism, how to read criticism, and the information related to it as well, right? Okay, I think I mentioned the my number. You can go back and then I'll get your number. Thank you.